Evan and Marissa had spent more than a decade building a quiet, steady life in Seattle, a life shaped by routines so familiar they hardly needed to think about them anymore. Their days moved like clockwork, early mornings, long work hours, quick errands, simple dinners eaten on opposite sides of the same kitchen table, and evenings that ended with tired smiles, a few gentle words, and a silence that had slowly begun to stretch between them. They still cared deeply for each other. There was still affection, still history, still that sense of partnership people spend years hoping to find, but something warm between them had cooled quietly, without any dramatic argument or obvious breaking point. It had simply faded, little by little, until they both woke one day and realized they were living more like polite roommates than the couple who once stayed up all night dreaming together. Neither of them knew exactly when it began, or how long it had been happening. It was not a sudden rupture but a slow drift, a soft unraveling of the spark that had once made everything between them feel bright and effortless. And yet, neither dared to say the words aloud. Instead, they kept moving through their days as if talking about the distance would make it real, as if acknowledging it might force them to confront the quiet fear that maybe, just maybe, love could fade even when no one meant for it to. One gray Thursday evening, while the city outside was wrapped in a misty drizzle that made the world seem blurred at the edges, Marissa found herself scrolling through old photos on her phone, pictures from their early days, grainy selfies taken at midnight diners, blurry snapshots of road trips, candid images of them laughing so hard their eyes disappeared into bright expressions of unfiltered joy. Looking at those memories, a sudden ache bloomed in her chest, a longing not just for the past, but for the version of themselves who lived inside those old frames. The versions who reached for each other without thinking, who laughed without holding back, who trusted the future like it was a promise no one could break. She held the phone in her hands a little too tightly as she cooked dinner, feeling that ache settle into something deeper, something like grief for a closeness they had somehow misplaced without noticing. And when Evan came home, looking equally worn down, equally distracted, she sensed in an instant that he felt the same distance too, even if he never put it into words. That night, as they sat on opposite ends of the couch, listening to the dishwasher hum louder than their conversation, something unexpected happened. Marissa's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Chloe, the young woman they had met the previous summer at a community event. Bright, warm, full of life, Chloe had a kind of energy that made rooms feel lighter. Her boyfriend, Tyler, shared that same liveliness. Together, they were the type of couple who made everything feel easier, more spontaneous, more fun. Marissa opened the message without thinking. It was simple. A short invitation, a weekend cabin near the coast. A small getaway. No obligations. No expectations. Just an open door. Something about it made her heart tap a little faster, not excitement, exactly, but something like anticipation. She handed the phone to Evan, expecting him to give one of his usual responses, the kind that sounded polite but non-committal. Instead, he read the message twice. His eyes sharpened, and for the first time in months she saw a spark of something new beneath his fatigue. "Do you want to go?" he asked, not casually, not carelessly, but with a quiet hopefulness that told her he, too, was searching for something they hadn't felt in a long time. Marissa nodded before she even realized she was doing it. The truth was simple, they both needed a change. Maybe even a small intervention. They didn't know what kind, or what it would bring. They only knew the air in their home had grown heavy, and this invitation felt like a breath of something fresh. The next morning, they packed quickly. There was no deep discussion, no emotional confessions, no heavy analyses of their relationship. Just two people filling bags with clothes, snacks, and the slight but unmistakable sense that maybe, just maybe, something was about to shift. The drive to the coast passed faster than expected. Instead of the strained silence that sometimes filled long car rides, their conversation was surprisingly easy. Not deep, not emotional, just simple. Memories. Old jokes. Small stories they hadn't told in years. It felt like their younger selves were sitting somewhere in the back seat, nudging them gently toward the version of their connection they thought they had lost. When they arrived at the cabin, the first thing they saw was Tyler waving from the porch of a small wooden structure overlooking a thick stretch of coastal forest. His grin was wide and fearless. Chloe stood beside him, bundled in a scarf, her eyes shining like she had been waiting for them. And the moment Evan and Marissa stepped out of the car, a rush of cold ocean air hit them, sharp, refreshing, and strangely awakening. Inside, the cabin felt cozy and warm. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, filling the space with the scent of cedar. Snacks were set out on the table. Tyler was laughing about burning the first batch of firewood, and Chloe's bright presence seemed to animate every corner of the room. Almost immediately, Evan and Marissa felt the shift. The energy the younger couple carried was contagious, not because of their age, but because of the openness and enthusiasm in everything they did. It was the way they moved together, how they listened, how they spoke with sincerity and curiosity. They brought a liveliness that made the room feel fuller, wider, more vibrant. Marissa noticed Evan smiling in a way she hadn't seen in months. The real smile, the one that touched his eyes and softened his features. And she felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't even realized had grown tight. The night unfolded gently at first. They talked about harmless topics, favorite movies, small regrets, funny stories from their pasts. But beneath the casual conversations, something deeper simmered. Not tension. Not attraction in the obvious sense. Something more subtle, more emotional, a sense of possibility. Of awakening. Of remembering how it felt to enjoy simple company without the heaviness of routine weighing on their shoulders. Chloe spoke with a confidence that drew Marissa in. Tyler's sincerity impressed Evan more than he expected. And together, the younger couple began to peel back layers of emotion Evan and Marissa had unknowingly buried beneath long weeks and tired nights. As the evening deepened, the firelight flickered across their faces, making shadows dance across the wooden walls. Laughter spilled freely, honest and unguarded, and slowly, Evan and Marissa began to feel something stirring, something they had forgotten they were capable of feeling. It wasn't about romance with someone else. It wasn't about desire or longing for a new relationship. It was about reawakening parts of themselves they had neglected for too long. Later, when Tyler suggested stepping out onto the deck to watch the stars, the four of them walked out into the crisp night air. The sky stretched endlessly above them, filled with constellations that shimmered faintly against the darkness. The ocean waves below whispered against the cliffs in a steady rhythm, grounding them in a rare stillness. They stood close together, not out of necessity, but because the night was cold enough to invite closeness, and warm enough to make it feel natural. Chloe leaned gently against Marissa's arm, a gesture so innocent yet so grounding that Marissa felt her heart soften. She hadn't realized how much she had missed simple closeness, touch that wasn't burdened by expectation or routine. Evan stood beside Tyler, listening to him talk with easy enthusiasm. And in Tyler's energy, Evan felt echoes of his younger self, hopeful, curious, full of a quiet confidence he had allowed life to slowly chip away. They talked about small dreams, private fears, quiet hopes they rarely voiced. They talked about routines that weighed on them, and connections they feared losing. They talked about love, not as a perfect thing, but as something delicate, something that needed attention and patience to remain alive. The night grew richer with each passing moment. Not dramatic. Not intense, but deeply emotional. Evan and Marissa shared glances that carried a type of meaning they hadn't exchanged in years. A recognition. A rediscovery. A reminder of who they once were, and who they could still be. The younger couple acted like a mirror, reflecting back the pieces Evan and Marissa thought they had misplaced. Their fearlessness inspired honesty. Their warmth inspired tenderness. Their presence inspired connection. And in that quiet blend of night air, starlight, and shared vulnerability, something subtle but unmistakable began to change. Later, as the four of them leaned against the railing, wrapped in blankets and surrounded by the soft sounds of the ocean, Chloe spoke words that shifted the night entirely. She said that she and Tyler admired Evan and Marissa, not out of flattery, but out of genuine respect. She talked about their steadiness, their patience, the way they treated each other with care even when the spark dimmed. She spoke of the strength it took to stay committed, the quiet devotion that had grown between them through years of life's unpredictable turns. Tyler echoed her feelings. He said that watching Evan and Marissa had taught them that love was not just passion or youth or excitement, but resilience, gentleness, and forgiveness. A partnership. A vow that life couldn't easily shake. Those words touched Evan and Marissa more deeply than they expected. They had come to the cabin searching for something undefined. Now, unexpectedly, they were being reminded of the value they had already built. The strength they had overlooked. The love that had survived even when the spark dimmed. Standing under the wide sky, the four of them shared a silence filled with awe, with warmth, with truth. For the first time in a long while, Evan and Marissa felt like they were truly seeing each other again. And in that moment, the emotional landscape shifted in a way neither could fully describe. The rest of the night unfolded softly, delicately. They spoke quietly, thoughtfully. They held hands. They laughed gently. And they allowed themselves to feel, to remember, to connect. What happened that weekend did not rely on dramatic choices or reckless impulses. It was something far more intricate, far more human. An emotional intimacy that blurred the edges of friendship, curiosity, and rediscovery. A closeness that challenged their assumptions about connection. A warmth that neither expected to find with people they had known for only a short time. It wasn't ultimately about passion or desire. It was about awakening. About a reminder that even love long settled can still be stirred. That even hearts dulled by routine can be revived. Evan and Marissa returned home different, not because of betrayal in the traditional sense, but because they had stepped into emotional territory they had never explored before. Territory that was gentle, risky, beautiful, and difficult to define. Territory that made them question what connection really meant, and whether loyalty was measured by behavior or by emotion itself. They drove back to Seattle in contemplative silence, each lost in a world of new feelings. They did not speak about what had happened. They didn't label it, or justify it, or try to explain it away. They simply carried it with them, soft, warm, and unsettling. Infidelity isn't always a moment. Sometimes, it is an emotion. A shift. A rediscovery of oneself in the presence of someone unexpected. And sometimes, it becomes a mirror reflecting the truths already present in a relationship, truths too quiet to hear until someone else awakens them. Evan and Marissa learned that weekend that love is fragile and fierce. That connection can change form. That the heart can open in ways that don't follow rules. And long after the cabin, the ocean, the firelight, and the young couple's warmth faded back into memory, the question remained, echoing gently through the corridors of their home and the silence of their nights. Was this the beginning of rebuilding what they lost? Or the beginning of discovering what they never knew they needed? Only time would tell.